You're finally drifting off. Then your leg kicks. Your whole body jolts. You're suddenly awake, heart pounding, and it happened for no reason you can name. That jolt has a name. It's called a hypnic jerk. Or sometimes a sleep start. And it might be one of the most common neurological events you never think about. Between 60 and 70% of people experience them at some point in their lives. About 10% deal with them on a nightly basis. You are not doing anything wrong, and you are not alone. The interesting question is what that jolt actually is, and what it reveals about what's happening in your brain at the exact moment you're trying to let go of the day. To understand the hypnic jerk, you first have to understand the moment in which it happens. It doesn't occur during stable sleep. It happens at the edge, in the very brief window when you're no longer fully awake but haven't yet committed to sleep. Your body doesn't enter sleep the way you switch off a light. It enters sleep through a transition, a period sleep researchers call the hypnagogic phase. During this phase, your heart rate begins to slow. Your breathing deepens. Your body temperature drops slightly. And your muscles, which have been carrying the tension of your waking hours, begin to release. That release is the key to everything that follows. It doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds gradually, unevenly, over the course of seconds. One moment your body is sending your nervous system a continuous signal, upright, stable, present, aware of where you are in space. And then, over those same seconds, that signal begins to fade. Something else shifts during this same interval. The tightly organized flow of conscious thought begins to break apart. The sensory monitoring your brain performs while you're awake, tracking sounds, tracking your body's position in space, tracking the meaning of what's around you, all of it starts to pull back. You are no longer fully processing the world. The systems that were built to protect you while you were in the world are still mid-transition. And that overlap, between a brain that is almost asleep and a body whose protective circuits haven't fully stood down, is exactly when the hypnic jerk occurs. Your brain is monitoring all of this. It monitors it every night, has been doing so every night of your life. But the transition from wakefulness to sleep is not a clean handoff. It's a negotiation between two very different operating modes, and sometimes, right in the middle of that negotiation, something fires. What fires? The hypnic jerk itself is a brief, involuntary contraction of the body's muscles. Researchers who have measured these contractions using electromyography, which records the electrical activity in muscle tissue, have found that the bursts are experience it as far more dramatic than that, because you're at the threshold of consciousness when it happens, and the jolt brings you fully back across that threshold. The patterns of these contractions are not all the same. Some propagate through the body in a way that closely resembles the audiogenic startle reflex, the same cascade that fires when a loud noise surprises you. Others follow different pathways through the muscles, suggesting the signal may originate from different points in the nervous system in different people, or even in different episodes in the same person. A structure that governs arousal and also controls the startle response appears to be involved in producing these events. The motor cortex, which coordinates voluntary movement, is part of the picture as well. The best current clinical description is that these contractions occur due to excitation of motor centers during sleep onset. That description identifies what happens but doesn't fully explain the mechanism. Exactly how these systems interact during the transition into sleep, and why they sometimes produce a jolt rather than a smooth, not cleanly resolved. Part of the difficulty is the timing. The entire event unfolds in a fraction of a second, in a brain that is simultaneously moving between states. By the time any standard measurement captures the discharge, the jolt has already fired and the brain is already returning toward wakefulness. The window is too brief and too transitional for a clean experimental view, which is one reason competing hypotheses have survived alongside each other for so long without one being eliminated. Here is most likely encountered if you've searched this before. As your muscles relax during the approach to sleep, your brain may interpret that sudden loss of muscle tone as a sign that you're physically falling. Not metaphorically falling into sleep. Actually falling, in space, toward the ground. And so the brain sends a fast corrective signal to your muscles: catch yourself, brace, don't hit the ground. The jolt is a protective grab that arrived in a situation where there's nothing to grab, because you're lying in a bed with nowhere to fall. Some researchers have connected this to evolutionary history. The proposal is that our ancestors, who may have slept in trees or other elevated positions, would have benefited from a protective check at the precise moment of losing muscular control. As the body's tone drops, the brain briefly assesses whether this loss of tone means sleep or means that the body is in freefall. And sometimes it concludes freefall and fires the correction. The account has an appealing shape. It makes the jolt feel purposeful rather than arbitrary. But its scientific status is worth being precise about. Researchers who have examined this explanation have noted that there is no published supporting evidence for the specific evolutionary mechanism. The hypothesis fits the surface features of what happens and it has been widely repeated, but researchers have not traced a complete causal chain from an evolutionary pressure to the specific neural circuit responsible. It is a hypothesis in the full and careful meaning of that word. The other main category of explanation focuses on what happens as the brain shifts states at the chemical level. Staying awake requires continuous work from the brain's arousal systems. The circuits that maintain alertness need sustained input to keep running. As sleep begins, those circuits start to be suppressed. The motor pathways that were operating at full capacity throughout your day also begin to quiet. One hypothesis is that the hypnic jerk happens when that quieting hits a brief interruption. A flicker of activity in the motor system that the incoming sleep onset signals haven't yet fully suppressed. For a fraction of a second, part of the motor circuitry is still active in a brain that is otherwise moving towards sleep, and it fires. Observe. The jerks happen at the transition, not during stable sleep. They become less frequent as sleep deepens and the shift completes. But it remains a model built from indirect evidence, not a confirmed step-by-step mechanism. A third hypothesis involves the brain running something like a check during the transition, briefly signaling the motor system to verify that the inhibitory process has properly engaged before fully committing to sleep. Under this account, the hypnic jerk is what happens when that check misfires and triggers. None of these three explanations has been definitively confirmed over the others. The honest scientific position at the current state of research is that the mechanism probably involves some combination of brainstem and motor system activity during the sleep-wake transition, but the full sequence has not been mapped. Here is what is known more confidently. Hypnic jerks are universal. They occur across all age groups, though the frequency changes over a lifetime. Research has found rates of 4 to 7 occurrences per hour during sleep onset in children between 8 and 12 years old. By the time people reach 65 to 80 years old, the rate has dropped to roughly 1 or 2 per hour. The brain's handling of the transition becomes quieter over the decades. What that pattern suggests is that the mechanism is not fixed in place. It changes as the nervous system matures. Children's brains are still developing the precision with which they manage this particular transition. A higher jerk frequency in childhood may reflect a sleep onset process that is still being refined, though that too is a working interpretation, not a settled conclusion. Under certain conditions, hypnic jerks appear more intense or more frequent. Sleep deprivation and disrupted sleep schedules are commonly associated with more pronounced episodes. The working explanation is that a more fatigued or disrupted nervous system handles the wakefulness to sleep transition with less precision. But this too remains a working explanation rather than a confirmed mechanism. What is firmly established is how they are classified. In medical terms, hypnic jerks are classified as physiological myoclonus. Physiological in this context means they are a normal variation in how the nervous system operates, not a symptom of pathology. They are not a seizure. They are not a warning sign. They are an involuntary event that occurs when the nervous system moves between states, and they fall within the ordinary range of human biology. There's something that tends to happen once you know about this. The next time you're at the edge of sleep and you feel the jolt, something shifts in how you experience it. Instead of just the alarm, there's a moment of noticing. That's the edge. That's the negotiation. That's your nervous system at the exact seam between wakefulness and sleep, running a process that is still not fully understood. Your brain does this every night, without announcing itself and without explaining itself. The arousal circuits begin to power down. The motor pathways start to release their grip on your muscles. And somewhere in that process, now and then, one system fires at a moment when it wasn't called for, and you're suddenly awake again, blinking, unsure what just happened. Science is still assembling the full picture. The reticular brainstem, the motor cortex, the competing theories about what briefly disrupts the quieting of the motor system, whether any of this connects to some older protective reflex from a time when losing your grip meant falling from a tree, these are threads that researchers are still pulling. What is settled is that you are in very good company. Between 6 and 7 in 10 people experience this. The jolt happens in children and in adults, in people who sleep easily and in people who don't. It is one of those biological events that briefly makes you aware that your brain is not a single unified thing doing one coherent job. It is a collection of overlapping systems, all transitioning at slightly different rates, all handing off from one state of existence to another. And sometimes, in the middle of that handoff, your leg kicks.